Lightweight, 155 pounds. The UFC didn't always have a glamour division, but lightweight became the showstopper. It's where the biggest fights happened, where chaos lived, and where stars became legends. Early on, this division bounced around. BJ Penn ruled for a while, but things didn't truly explode until Frankie Edgar toppled the much larger Penn in 2010, showing speed could beat size. Then came the wild carousel. Benson Henderson, Anthony Pettis, Rafael dos Anjos. Title changes everywhere, but everything shifted when Conor McGregor arrived. In 2016, McGregor knocked out Eddie Alvarez and made lightweight the division to watch. It didn't matter that he never defended the belt. McGregor had already turned this division into pay-per-view gold. Then came Khabib Nurmagomedov. The undefeated Dagestani mauler stormed through the division, crushed McGregor in 2018, and made the 155-pound title feel untouchable. Khabib was a puzzle nobody could solve, 29-0, and walked away on top. And let's not forget the cursed fight that defined this division's madness. Khabib versus Tony Ferguson. Booked 5 times, cancelled 5 times. Injuries, weight cut disasters, even a random cable trip. It became MMA's most infamous matchup that never happened. Even today, lightweight is stacked like no other. Poirier, Gaethje, Oliveira. Every fight feels like a mini-war. Titles change hands faster than you can blink, but every brawl is a thriller. Heavyweight, 206 to 265 pounds. If lightweight is where stars are made, heavyweight is where legends get knocked out cold. The heavyweight division has always been unpredictable. One punch can turn the whole fight upside down, and it happens all the time. The early days were a total madhouse. UFC heavyweight history began with giant dudes trading bombs. Mark Coleman, Maurice Smith, Randy Couture. Then came the brawl era, with brutal knockouts defining every title fight. But nobody embodied heavyweight madness quite like Brock Lesnar. A former WWE star who showed up with a monster frame and freakish speed, Lesnar steamrolled his way to the belt in just his 4th fight. The UFC didn't care that he was raw. Lesnar sold tickets. Period. Randy Couture added his own chaos to the story. At 45 years old, Couture came out of retirement and won the title again, proving age didn't matter when you could still fight smart and hit hard. Then heavyweight got weird. Constant injuries, champs who disappeared for years, and belts that felt cursed. For nearly a decade, the UFC couldn't keep a heavyweight king on the throne. Then came Francis Ngannou, a human wrecking ball who looked like he was chiseled from granite. Ngannou erased guys with one punch, terrified everyone, and finally claimed gold. But just when the UFC thought it had its new superstar, Ngannou walked away after a contract dispute, leaving the title vacant and the division in limbo all over again. Even today, heavyweight remains the UFC's most chaotic division. It's big guys swinging wild, unpredictable shots, where strategy often takes a backseat to pure power. Every fight feels like a coin flip, and that's exactly why fans can't look away. Women's Bantamweight, 135 pounds. Dana White famously said women would never fight in the UFC until Rousey's armbar highlight reel turned him into a believer. Rousey was a phenomenon from the jump. 6 straight UFC finishes by armbar, movie roles, magazine covers, and PPV numbers that rivaled the men. She dominated so completely that most fights felt like foregone conclusions before the walkouts were even done. Then came UFC 193. Holly Holm landed a head kick that shocked the world and ended Ronda's reign in devastating fashion. Rousey disappeared for over a year, returned against Amanda Nunes, and got steamrolled again. Just like that, the Rousey era was over, but bantamweight didn't stop. Amanda Nunes picked up where Rousey left off, and in some ways surpassed her. The Lioness wrecked the division, defending her title 7 times and beating every former champ along the way. And yet, despite all that dominance, the division struggled. The UFC couldn't recreate the star power Rousey brought. It became rarer, and contenders struggled to break through into mainstream attention. By the time Nunes retired in 2023, the belt was vacant, and the UFC was scrambling to figure out who could carry this weight class forward. No clear star, no clear next queen, just a reminder that this division was built on Ronda's shoulders, and nothing's really been the same since she left. Flyweight, 125 pounds. The UFC's smallest male fighters, flyweights, debuted in 2012, and for a while, it felt like this whole division existed just for one man, Demetrius "Mighty Mouse" Johnson. Johnson wasn't just winning, he was making everyone else look like they were moving in slow motion, from arm bars to suplex to armbar combos. DJ's reign was surgical. 11 straight title defenses, clean technique, and absolutely zero mainstream buzz. That was the problem. Despite Johnson's brilliance, UFC fans never fully embraced flyweight. PPV numbers lagged, casual fans complained these guys didn't knock each other out enough, and Dana White himself openly criticized Mighty Mouse for not promoting himself harder. By 2018, the writing was on the wall. After Johnson lost a razor-thin decision to Henry Cejudo, rumors swirled that flyweight was on the chopping block entirely. Fighters were openly saying they didn't know if their division would exist in 6 months. Then Cejudo went full Triple C mode. He knocked out TJ Dillashaw and declared himself the division's saviour, mixing Olympic gold medal bravado with brash mic skills. Suddenly, flyweight had personality. And the UFC backed off killing it. Even today, flyweight is caught in a weird limbo. The fights are fast, technical, and often incredible. But this remains the UFC's least promoted men's division. Men's featherweight, 145 pounds. Before the McGregor era, this division was Jose Aldo's kingdom. Aldo became the first UFC featherweight champion when the promotion absorbed WEC in 2010, and he dominated for years. Leg kicks, speed, fight IQ, Aldo made elite contenders look average, stacking up 7 straight title defenses. But then came December 2015. McGregor versus Aldo. 13 seconds. That's all it took for Conor McGregor to land the cleanest left hand of his career and instantly knock out a man who hadn't lost in a decade. It was the birth of the McGregor era, and a moment the UFC still plays in highlight reels today. Featherweight never looked the same after that. McGregor grabbed the belt and never defended it. While McGregor chased double champ status at lightweight, the title picture became chaotic again. Aldo regained the belt, Max Holloway took it from him, and the wars kept coming. Then Alexander Volkanovski took over. Volkanovski wasn't flashy at first, but his consistency was unmatched. He beat Holloway 3 times, fended off all challengers, and built a dominant reign. All while fighting some of the highest level competition in the sport. Featherweight has stayed deep and dangerous ever since. It's full of fast, technical fighters, legendary rivalries, and moments that shaped UFC history. Light heavyweight, 205 pounds. For years, light heavyweight was the division where stars lived and chaos reigned. When fans thought of UFC legends, this was the weight class they pictured. Chuck Liddell's Mohawk, Tito Ortiz's ground and pound, Rampage Jackson slamming opponents through the canvas. This was where rivalries felt personal, and championship belts traded hands like poker chips. After Liddell, Rashad Evans, Lyoto Machida, Shogun Rua all had their moments at the top. None could stay there long. Then came John Jones, the most gifted, controversial, and confounding fighter in UFC history. In 2011, Jones destroyed Shogun Rua to become the youngest champion ever at 23 years old. His skill set was terrifying. Spinning elbows, sniper-like kicks, perfect wrestling. For a while, it felt like nobody could touch him inside the cage. But outside the cage, total disaster. Failed drug tests, arrests, suspensions. Jones derailed himself so many times that even the UFC couldn't protect him from himself. Every time the division seemed to stabilise, Jones returned, wrecked the latest contender, then got suspended again. In between the Jones storms, light heavyweight became a revolving door. Daniel Cormier wore the belt and defended it honourably. But fans always knew Jones beat him twice. When Jones finally left the division, it didn't heal. Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira, Jiří Procházka. Great fighters, but none with Jones's star power. Middleweight, 185 pounds. Middleweight didn't always feel like a marquee division until Anderson Silva arrived and rewrote the script. When the Spider took over in 2006, he turned 185 into his personal highlight reel. Front kicks to the face, taunting opponents mid-fight, Matrix-like head movement, and a 16-fight win streak that made everyone else look ordinary. His reign was stylish, unpredictable, and intimidating. And yet, middleweight always had chaos lurking. Silva's fight with Chael Sonnen proved that perfectly. Sonnen trash-talked Silva for months, then actually dominated him for 4.5 rounds, until Silva slapped on a triangle choke in the final minutes to pull off one of the UFC's wildest comebacks. But Silva's dominance didn't last forever. The division unravelled spectacularly when Chris Weidman knocked Silva out cold at UFC 162. Then in their rematch, Silva snapped his leg in one of the most shocking injuries ever seen in MMA. The spider's web had come undone. After Silva, middleweight became a battleground of opportunists and unlikely champs. Luke Rockhold, Michael Bisping, Robert Whittaker. The title bounced around for years. Then came Israel Adesanya, who seemed like the silver heir fans were waiting for. Precision striking, swagger, and highlight reel finishes. Adesanya restored order for a while, but even his run eventually hit a wall against Alex Pereira. Middleweight has always been about snipers, lanky, precise strikers with knockout power. It's given the UFC some of its flashiest moments and some of its most brutal falls from grace. Welterweight, 170 pounds. This division's legacy really took shape in the Matt Hughes era. Hughes was the farm-strong wrestler who ragdolled opponents and made grinding domination look cool. Then came Georges St-Pierre, a polite Canadian who quietly became one of the most complete fighters ever. St-Pierre beat Hughes, took the belt, and went on to defend it 9 times. His reign was efficient, calculated, and almost robotic in its brilliance. But welterweight wasn't just about dominance. It's also where judging controversies thrived. Robbie Lawler's war with Carlos Condit at UFC 195 remains one of the most debated decisions in UFC history. Lawler somehow retained his title despite Condit outstriking him and nearly breaking him in round 4. When GSP walked away, the division spun through chaos. Johnny Hendricks, Tyron Woodley, Robbie Lawler. The belt kept changing hands while the UFC struggled to find a consistent star. Woodley defended it 4 times, but never became a mainstream name, despite elite performances. Then came Kamaru Usman, a wrestling machine who put together a 15-fight UFC win streak, held the title for nearly 4 years, and seemed invincible. Until Leon Edwards pulled off one of the most dramatic head kick knockouts in UFC history. Welterweight fights are often gritty, sometimes technical, but always capable of exploding into moments that leave fans stunned. For 2 decades, this has been one of the UFC's most reliable divisions. A mix of workhorse champions, epic rivalries, and just enough chaos to keep fans glued. Women's featherweight, 145 pounds. This one has always felt like a strange experiment that never quite worked. When the UFC created the division in 2017, it wasn't to build a deep roster. It was to showcase Chris Cyborg, a fighter so dominant she terrified most challengers before they even stepped in the cage. At first, Cyborg delivered exactly what Dana White hoped for: brutal knockouts, physical dominance, and a reign that felt inevitable. But behind the scenes, there was almost no division at all. The UFC barely signed any featherweights. Fights at 145 often featured bantamweights moving up just to fill a slot. Even after Amanda Nunes dethroned Cyborg in just 51 seconds, the problem didn't go away. Nunes became champ, but she had almost nobody left to defend her 145 belt against. The UFC struggled to book contenders, and by 2020, the division felt like it was running on fumes. Fighters like Felicia Spencer and Megan Anderson were brought in to give Nunes opponents, but the depth just wasn't there. And unlike strawweight or bantamweight, this division never built stars. It was tied entirely to Cyborg first, then to Nunes. By 2023, when Nunes retired, the future of women's featherweight became one big question mark. No champion, almost no ranked fighters, and almost no buzz. The UFC quietly removed the belt from the official rankings, and most signs point to the division being on its way out completely. Bantamweight, 135 pounds. The division officially launched in 2010 with a simple promise: smaller fighters, faster action. And right away, it was delivered. Dominic Cruz became the inaugural champ, and his footwork-heavy style set the tone for the division. Angles, movement, endless volume. But bantamweight never stayed stable for long. Injuries, title turnover, and shocking upsets kept resetting the deck. Cruz himself got sidelined for years, opening the door for Renan Barão to run wild. Barão's reign was supposed to last, until TJ Dillashaw showed up and dismantled him in one of the greatest upsets ever. Dillashaw then became the face of the division until USADA caught up to him. He tested positive for EPO after a failed drop to flyweight, got suspended for 2 years, and left the title vacant once again. That's when Cody Garbrandt exploded onto the scene. In 2016, Garbrandt put on a masterclass to take Dillashaw's belt, dancing, taunting, and styling on Cruz. It looked like bantamweight had found its new star. But Garbrandt's reign ended fast. 3 brutal knockout losses later, he was gone from title contention. Even recently, the belt's path has stayed wild. Aljamain Sterling won the title after Peter Yan got disqualified for an illegal knee, a controversial finish that split the fanbase right down the middle. Today, bantamweight is stacked top to bottom with talent. The division might not have the UFC's biggest stars, but it delivers some of the fastest, most technical, and most unpredictable fights in the sport. Women's strawweight, 115 pounds. Strawweight might be the UFC's smallest division, but it's also where some of the most technical, competitive wars have happened. When the UFC launched the division in 2014, they did it with a bang. A full season of The Ultimate Fighter to crown the first champ. Carla Esparza claimed that title, but her reign ended fast. Joanna Jędrzejczyk stormed in and redefined what elite striking looked like at 115. She didn't just win, she overwhelmed opponents with volume, precision, and footwork that kept them frozen in place. Her 5-title defense run turned strawweight into a can't-miss division. But Rose Namajunas changed everything with a stunning first-round knockout at UFC 217. That upset felt seismic. The golden era of Joanna ended in one perfect left hook. Strawweight has rarely stayed predictable since. Zhang Weili rose to stardom with her 42-second demolition of Jessica Andrade, and then engaged in one of the greatest title fights in UFC history. A 5-round war against Joanna that left both women battered and immortalised. And unlike some of the UFC's struggling divisions, strawweight remains loaded with talent. Rose, Zhang, Marina Rodriguez, Yan Xiaonan. Every fight at the top feels like a coin flip. What makes strawweight unique is the speed, technique, and volume. This division rewards skill above everything else, and that's why hardcore fans love it. Women's flyweight, 125 pounds. When the UFC launched women's flyweight in 2017, it felt like a fix to an awkward problem. Strawweight was too small for some fighters, Bantamweight was too big. Flyweight would become the perfect middle ground. And Valentina Shevchenko made it her personal playground. Shevchenko dominated the division like no one else. Her reign started in 2018, and for years, challengers barely made it out of the second round. Head kicks, spinning back kicks, vicious elbows. Valentina didn't just win, she styled on her opponents. Flyweight quickly became known as the Valentina division, and that created its own issue. The UFC struggled to find fresh contenders who could sell a fight. The depth wasn't there yet, and most title fights felt like a formality where fans were waiting to see how Valentina would win, not whether she would. Even Shevchenko's toughest tests early on, like a close split decision against Taila Santos, only highlighted how much she was carrying the division's profile. For years, Flyweight lacked stars outside of her. Then came 2023. Alexa Grasso shocked everyone at UFC 285 by submitting Shevchenko in the fourth round and snapping one of the most dominant title reigns in UFC history. Suddenly, Flyweight felt alive again. Today, the division is finally starting to fill out. New challengers, competitive fights, and a rematch that delivered another close battle between Grasso and Shevchenko. Catchweight. Now, this one isn't a real division, but it's given the UFC some of its most chaotic nights. A catchweight fight happens when someone misses weight, or when late-notice replacements force fighters to meet somewhere in the middle. And those fights often come with drama the UFC would rather forget. Take UFC 279 in 2022. Khamzat Chimaev was supposed to headline against Nate Diaz, until Chimaev missed weight by a whopping 7.5 pounds. The entire card had to be reshuffled hours before weigh-ins ended. Diaz fought Tony Ferguson instead. Chimaev faced Kevin Holland, and the whole thing felt like a scramble backstage. Then there's Nick Diaz versus Anderson Silva at UFC 183. That was billed as a dream fight, a meeting of legends. But it took place at 185 pounds, neither fighter's best weight, and ended with both men failing drug tests afterward. Silva tested positive for banned substances. Diaz popped for marijuana. The fight result turned into a no contest, and those are just the famous ones. UFC history is full of moments where fighters either couldn't make weight or took late-notice replacements at odd limits. Anthony Johnson regularly fought at catchweights when cutting to welterweight got too dangerous. Fighters like Paul Daly and Kelvin Gastelum missed weight multiple times, turning scheduled bouts into catchweight scraps at the last minute. Catchweight are basically a reminder of how unpredictable this sport can be behind the scenes. Whether it's a fighter's failed cut or the UFC playing matchmaker on the fly, catchweight chaos has become an unofficial part of UFC lore. Openweight. Before the UFC had weight classes, it had chaos. In the early 90s, this wasn't the organised, structured sport we know today. It was billed as a real-life experiment. No weight limits, no gloves, no time limits, no rules. At UFC 1 in 1993, they simply threw anyone willing to fight into the cage. Royce Gracie, a 175-pound jiu-jitsu master in a GI, fought men twice his size. In one night, he choked out Art Jimmerson, a pro boxer wearing only one glove, then submitted Ken Shamrock and finished off 260-pound Gerard Gordeau to win the whole tournament. These early UFC events featured everything from sumo wrestlers to kickboxers, often facing each other in back-to-back fights with minimal recovery time. Keith Hackney famously punched 600-pound sumo wrestler Emmanuel Yarbrough until he collapsed under his own weight. Tank Abbott slammed dudes into the fence, bare-knuckle style, like a bar brawler with a mullet. There were no weight divisions, no athletic commission oversight. The whole thing looked more like a street fight tournament than a professional sport. This era didn't last long. By UFC 12 in 1997, the organisation finally added heavyweight and lightweight divisions and began tightening the rules to survive legal scrutiny. The state of New York had banned the UFC altogether, calling it human cockfighting. And, without reforms, the entire promotion might have died before it even reached mainstream attention. That wild, lawless start shaped everything that came after. The UFC went from freak show spectacle to global sport. But it all started with openweight madness, where the only rule was survival. And that's it. So now to you, if you could fight in any UFC division, past or present, would you go for the speed of flyweight, the power of heavyweight, or the pure madness of the old openweight days? Comment down below as you leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.